Where you headed, man?
Home. Just parked my car.
You been drinking tonight?
No.
Mind if I take a look inside the car? Looks like you were in a hurry to get out.
I'm good,
Keep
officer.
your hands where I can see them.
Keep them right here.
All right.
Officer Derek Matthews had been with the Riverside Police Department for 11 years when he made the traffic stop that would end his career, cost his city $5 million, and become a case study in how racial bias operates, even within law enforcement itself. He was 34 years old, experienced enough to know better, but apparently convinced that a black man driving a nice car through Riverside's upscale Willowbrook neighborhood at night must be up to no good. Tuesday evening in late September, he radioed dispatch about what he called suspicious activity near the intersection of Magnolia Avenue and Cypress Street. The suspicious driver was Marcus Thompson, a 12-year veteran detective with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, who was simply driving home after visiting his mother. What Matthews did next, ignoring basic procedure, dismissing clear identification, and escalating a routine traffic stop into a violent arrest, would become a textbook example of how racial profiling infects even those sworn to protect and serve. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop a comment right now and tell me your country, your state, wherever you are. If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Willowbrook sits on the eastern edge of Riverside County, where manicured lawns and Spanish-style homes climb into the foothills. It's the kind of place that prides itself on low crime rates and neighborhood watch signs, where Tesla charging stations outnumber gas pumps and the median home price hovers around $850,000. The streets are wide and well lit, lined with jacaranda trees that bloom purple in spring and drop their petals like confetti. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late September. The air still held the day's warmth. That particular Southern California evening where the temperature drops just enough to be comfortable but not enough to need a jacket. The dinner rush was over, leaving the residential streets quiet except for the occasional dog walker or jogger taking advantage of the cooler air. Marcus Thompson had been with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department for 12 years. 12 years working homicide cases that required not just investigative skill, but the ability to navigate the complex emotional terrain of grief, anger, and justice. He'd spent 4 years in gang enforcement, building cases that dismantled 3 major trafficking operations. 5 years before that in robbery homicide, closing cold cases that had haunted families for decades. 3 years in internal affairs, the assignment nobody wanted but everybody respected him for taking. He had testified before the California State Assembly on criminal justice reform, coordinated with federal agencies on multi-jurisdictional cases, trained over 200 new detectives in interview techniques and constitutional law. He'd received the Medal of Valor twice, the Distinguished Service Award, and a commendation from the Department of Justice. His supervisors called him methodical. His colleagues called him professor for his habit of turning every case into a teaching moment. At 41 years old, Marcus was exactly where he'd worked to be. Respected, accomplished, making a difference. That Tuesday, Marcus was off duty, returning from his weekly dinner with his mother in San Bernardino. He wore dark jeans and a UCLA polo shirt, the same outfit he'd worn to countless similar dinners. Professional enough for his mother's standards, casual enough to be comfortable. His badge and service weapon were locked in his glove compartment, standard protocol for off-duty travel. He looked like what he was. A successful professional driving home after a family visit. He'd done nothing to attract attention. He'd been driving 3 miles under the speed limit, using his turn signals, staying in the right lane. But to Officer Derek Matthews, patrolling Willowbrook's quiet streets, Marcus's presence was enough to trigger suspicion. Derek Matthews was 34 years old. He'd been with Riverside PD for 11 years, all of them spent on patrol despite multiple attempts to move into specialized units. His applications had been denied each time, though the reasons given were always vague. He was ambitious and diligent about writing tickets, and deeply concerned about maintaining what he called community standards in Riverside's nicer neighborhoods. And this Tuesday evening, Matthews had noticed something that made him uncomfortable. A black man in a newer model BMW driving through Willowbrook's tree-lined streets. In Matthews' mind, the equation was simple. Nice car plus black driver plus upscale neighborhood equals probable crime. He'd seen enough episodes of Cops to know that drug dealers drove expensive cars. Never mind that the BMW was a 3-year-old 5 Series. Nice, but not flashy. Never mind that the driver was obeying every traffic law. Never mind that Willowbrook's own demographics included successful professionals of every background. Matthews saw a black man and decided he didn't belong. He followed the BMW for 6 blocks, running the plates while looking for any violation. The registration came back clean to Marcus Thompson. No warrants, no violations. But Matthews wasn't satisfied. He kept following, waiting. At the intersection of Magnolia and Cypress, Marcus signaled and made a perfectly legal right turn. Matthews hit his lights. Derek Matthews had been with the Riverside Police Department for 11 years. In that time, he'd compiled a record that should have raised red flags at every level of supervision. 14 complaints. 14 complaints over 11 years. 9 of them involved allegations of racial profiling or excessive force against drivers of color. 3 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and mandatory retraining that apparently hadn't taken. The other 11 had been closed with insufficient evidence despite dashcam footage that mysteriously malfunctioned during the incidents in question. Matthews had a pattern. He made traffic stops in Willowbrook at 3 times the rate of other officers, and 80% of those stops involved black or Latino drivers, despite the neighborhood's predominantly white demographics. In 2019, he'd stopped a black pediatrician for failing to signal despite witness statements that the turn signal was clearly used. The doctor filed a complaint. It went nowhere. In 2021, he detained a Latino software engineer for 30 minutes, claiming the man seemed nervous. Another complaint, another dead end. Earlier this year, he'd handcuffed a black real estate agent showing a home to clients, insisting her legitimate business cards could be fake. The complaint was still pending. The pattern was clear. The documentation was extensive. But somehow Matthews remained on patrol, racking up commendations for his proactive policing from supervisors who praised his attention to community safety. But those same evaluations noted his occasional overzealousness and need to improve community relations. Those notes never translated into meaningful consequences. When Matthews saw the BMW make that turn, his mind immediately filled in a narrative. Drug dealer, stolen car, someone casing houses for burglary. Anything but the truth. Matthews pulled up behind the BMW as Marcus came to a stop at the curb. He could see the driver's silhouette, patient, hands visible on the steering wheel professional. But Matthews wasn't looking for professionalism, he was looking for a crime. He stepped out of his patrol car, hand already resting on his weapon, and approached the driver's window. Marcus was lowering his window before Matthews even reached the car, his hands clearly visible, dome light already on, every movement calculated to de-escalate. He knew this dance. Every black cop knew this dance. License and registration. Matthews sighed, skipping any explanation for the stop. Marcus nodded slowly. Of course. Officer, can you tell me why you pulled me over? License and registration. Now, I'm reaching for my wallet, Marcus announced, moving deliberately. It's in my back right pocket. He handed over his license, Marcus Thompson. Address in Baldwin Hills. The registration was in the glove compartment, along with something else that would have ended the stop immediately if Matthews had been interested in the truth. What are you doing in this neighborhood? Driving home from visiting my mother. I live about 15 minutes from here. You live in Willowbrook? Baldwin Hills, I was just passing through. Baldwin Hills, another nice neighborhood. Matthews' suspicion deepened rather than eased. In his experience, certain people claiming to live in certain neighborhoods usually meant one thing: lies. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, what's the probable cause for this stop? Step out of the vehicle. Now, have you ever been pulled over for seemingly no reason? Type yes or no in the comments. Marcus felt a familiar burn of indignation, but kept it controlled. Officer, I'm asking you to articulate the reasonable suspicion for this stop as required by Terry V. Ojado in the 4th. And Matthews didn't like that. Most people he stopped didn't quote case law. They just complied. You failed to signal that turned back there. I signaled. Your dash cam will show I signaled. Are you refusing to comply with a lawful order? The magic words. The escalation had turned a conversation into a confrontation. Marcus knew where this was headed. He'd seen it too many times from both sides of the badge. Officer Matthews, Marcus said, reading the nameplate. I'm going to comply with your order, but I want to state clearly that I signaled that turn. I've committed no traffic violation, and this stop lacks reasonable suspicion out now. Marcus opened his door slowly, narrating every movement. A woman walking her dog had stopped on the sidewalk, iPhone already recording. I'm exiting the vehicle as ordered, Marcus said loudly enough for witnesses. My hands are visible. I am not resisting. He stepped out. 6'2" athletic build maintained by department fitness standards in weekend basketball. Matthews took an instinctive step back. Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. Officer, I'm a law enforcement officer myself. My badge and credentials are in the glove compartment. Matthews paused for exactly 2 seconds. Anyone can buy a badge online. Turn around, I'm Detective Marcus Thompson, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, badge number 4827, 12 years on the job. You can verify that right now. I said, "Turn around, Marcus," Ned, placing his hands on the warm metal of his car roof. He could hear more witnesses gathering, more phones coming out. Good. Everything about this stop was wrong, and he wanted it documented. Matthews began his pat-down, aggressive from the start, the kind of search designed to provoke a reaction. "Officer Matthews, there's no weapon on my person. My service weapon is secured in the glove compartment along with my credentials. This search is excessive. Stop talking." Matthews continued his search, finding nothing because there was nothing to find except a wallet, keys, and a phone. But he wasn't done. He grabbed Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back. "You're under arrest." "For what crime?" "Failure to comply. Resisting arrest. Obstruction of justice." "I haven't resisted. I've complied with every order." This is being recorded by multiple witnesses. Matthews clicked the handcuffs tighter than necessary, the metal biting into Marcus's wrists. Several witnesses called out in protest. "That's a cop." Someone shouted. "He told you he's a cop." "Everyone back up," Matthews ordered, but the phones kept recording. "Do you think Matthews should have just verified the credentials at this point? Let me know below." Matthews pushed Marcus toward the patrol car, rougher than necessary. Outside, Marcus saw what he'd expected. Body camera blinking red, dash cam running, at least 6 witnesses with phones out. This was all being documented, every second of Matthews' career-ending mistake. "Officer Matthews," Marcus said calmly as he was placed in the back seat, "you are violating department policy, constitutional law, and basic common sense. My credentials are in that glove compartment. One radio call would confirm my identity. This will end your career." Matthews slammed the door without responding. The drive to the Riverside police station took 12 minutes. Marcus spent it mentally cataloging every violation, every policy breach, every lawsuit-worthy action. He had extensive experience building cases. In this case was building itself. They arrived at the station at 9:26 p.m. Matthews walked Marcus inside, still handcuffed, past the front desk where Sergeant Linda Rodriguez looked up with concern. "Matthews, what do you have?" "Failure to comply. Resisting obstruction." Marcus spoke up, voice clear and controlled. "Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm Detective Marcus Thompson, LASD Homicide Division, badge number 4827. I was stopped without cause, illegally searched, and falsely arrested. Officer Matthews refused to verify my credentials, which are in my vehicle." Rodriguez's face went pale. "Matthews, did you check his credentials? Anyone can fake a badge. Did you check?" He was being uncooperative. "He just gave me his badge number." "Detective Thompson, can you verify any additional information?" Marcus recited his employee ID, his division commander's name, his recent case numbers, details only a real detective would know. Rodriguez picked up the phone. "This is Sergeant Rodriguez, Riverside PD. I need to verify an LASD detective's credentials." The confirmation came back within 90 seconds. Detective Marcus Thompson, 12-year veteran, currently assigned to Homicide Division, numerous commendations, spotless record. Rodriguez hung up and turned to Matthews, voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "You arrested a decorated detective for driving while black. He failed to. He was uncuff him now." Matthews fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. The cuffs came off, revealing deep marks on Marcus's wrists. Skin broken in 2 places. "Should officers face automatic termination after wrongful arrest based on racial profiling?" "Drop your answer." Captain James Harrison arrived within minutes. A 25-year veteran who'd worked his way up from patrol. He'd seen bad stops before, but rarely one this egregious. Rodriguez briefed him in quick, clinical sentences. Each word deepened a furrow in Harrison's brow. Harrison turned to Marcus. "Detective Thompson, on behalf of the Riverside Police Department, I sincerely apologize. This is inexcusable." Marcus nodded but remained silent. He was building his case. Every word mattered. Harrison turned to Matthews. "Badge and gun. Administrative leave effective immediately." "Captain, you were just racially profiling a fellow officer who was driving home from visiting his mother." "Badge and gun, no." Matthews handed him over, hands shaking. For the first time, he seemed to understand what he'd done. His face had gone from red to white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the station's air conditioning. Captain Harrison personally drove Marcus back to his car, apologizing the entire way. The witnesses were still there, still recording. Word had spread. There were now dozens of people, some holding signs that had seemingly materialized from nowhere. Driving while black is not a crime. Within 2 hours, the videos had exploded across social media. Multiple angles from different witnesses. Matthews approaching with his hand on his weapon, the aggressive pat-down. The too tight handcuffs. Marcus's calm recitation of his credentials. Matthews's refusal to listen. Racist cop arrests black detective for existing. LASD detective racially profiled by Riverside. PD anyone can buy a badge. Officer ignores fellow cop's credentials. The outrage was immediate and intense. The National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers issued a formal statement condemning the arrest. The ACLU called for a Department of Justice investigation. The sheriff of Los Angeles County himself called for immediate and severe consequences. Matthews gave a brief statement through his union representative. I was just doing my job. Following my training, he was fired within 72 hours. Riverside quickly announced policy changes, including mandatory verification of law enforcement credentials and expanded de-escalation training. But the real damage was done. The video showed everything. A blackprofessional.com and compliant, arrested for the crime of driving through a nice neighborhood while black. Civil rights attorneys contacted Marcus within hours. This wasn't just false arrests. This was racial profiling, excessive force, violation of civil rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and denial of equal protection under law. The lawsuit named Officer Derek Matthews, the city of Riverside, the Riverside Police Department, Chief Patricia Williams, and 3 supervising officers who had ignored previous complaints. The claims were extensive: violation of 4th Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure, violation of 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, racial profiling and violation of California law, false arrest and false imprisonment, excessive force causing physical injury, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent training and supervision, failure to intervene, municipal liability for unconstitutional customs and practices, conspiracy to violate civil rights. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached the same conclusion: indefensible. The videos were everywhere. The witnesses were credible. Marcus's credentials were unimpeachable. Matthews' history of complaints established a pattern. The department's failure to address that pattern established liability. The city of Riverside settled within 4 months. $5 million paid to Marcus Thompson, the largest police misconduct settlement in the city's history. Officer Derek Matthews was terminated 3 days after the incident. The termination letter was final and devastating. Your actions violated multiple department policies, state law, and constitutional protections. You failed to follow basic verification procedures, escalated without cause, and arrested a fellow law enforcement officer based solely on racial bias. Your conduct has irreparably damaged the department's reputation and community trust. Matthews' name was entered into California's police decertification data. His law enforcement career was over at 34 years old. Matthews tried to appeal through his union. The appeal was denied unanimously. Should racial profiling within law enforcement trigger automatic federal investigation? Drop your answer. The Riverside Police Department faced intense scrutiny. How had Matthews, with 14 complaints over 11 years, remained on patrol? Why hadn't supervisors addressed the clear pattern of racial profiling? Why did it take arresting a fellow cop for consequences to finally stick? Internal Affairs conducted a comprehensive review. The findings were damning. Systematic failure to investigate complaints against Matthews. Pattern of dismissing racial profiling allegations as insufficient evidence. Supervisors who praised Matthews' proactive policing while ignoring discrimination complaints, training programs that emphasized officer safety over constitutional rights, no meaningful early warning system for problematic officers, culture that protected officers over community members, failure to analyze traffic stop data showing clear racial disparities, performance evaluations that rewarded quantity of stops over quality of policing. The Department of Justice opened a pattern and practice investigation. Their findings confirmed systemic failure at every level. Reforms were announced: mandatory verification of any claimed law enforcement credentials before arrest, early warning system triggered after 3 complaints, automatic review of all traffic stops with demographic analysis, enhanced escalation training with emphasis on implicit bias, body cameras that cannot be disabled during citizen contacts, independent review board for all complaints involving race, quarterly analysis of stop data by neighborhood and demographics. Termination made easier for patterns of biased policing. Marcus testified at city council hearings. His testimony was powerful. I've been a cop for 12 years. I've arrested murderers, gang members, dangerous people who needed to be off the streets. I understand the job. I respect the job. But what Officer Matthews did wasn't policing. It was racism with a badge. He paused, letting the words sink in. I did everything right. I complied. I identified myself. I quoted the relevant law. I had 12 years of exemplary service, commendations, a spotless record. And none of it mattered because Officer Matthews saw my skin color and decided I was a criminal. If it can happen to me, a decorated detective, what chance does a regular citizen have? The room was silent. This wasn't just about one traffic stop. This was proof that for some people, no achievement is enough when bias has made its decision. Marcus had followed every protocol. He'd been polite, compliant, professional. He was driving his own car, obeying traffic laws, literally just trying to get home. And none of it mattered. Because Matthews saw a black man in a nice car in a nice neighborhood, and his biased mind said that was impossible. Every fact that contradicted this assumption was dismissed. Valid, licensed, to be fake. Law enforcement credentials, anyone can buy those online. Calm demeanor. Suspicious, knowledge of the law, even more suspicious. This is how systemic racism operates in everyday spaces. It's not always dramatic or violent. Sometimes it's quiet, insidious, built on assumptions that seem reasonable until examined. It's assuming a black professional must be lying about their address. It's believing a nice car must be stolen if the driver is black. It's seeing a black person in a predominantly white space and immediately looking for the crime that justifies their presence. And when that bias is backed by the authority to detain, to search, to arrest, to use force, it doesn't just harm individuals. It sends a message. You don't belong here. No matter your credentials, no matter your service, no matter your humanity. Derek Matthews' career is over. That's justice. The city of Riverside paid $5 million. That's accountability. Policies were changed, training was enhanced, oversight was increased. That's progress. But money doesn't undo the humiliation of being handcuffed on your own street. Policy changes don't restore the dignity stripped away in front of witnesses. Training doesn't erase the message that even a detective's badge isn't enough to protect you from racism. The real question is, what changes now? How many more Marcus Thompsons are pulled over every night, lacking the credentials or knowledge to protect themselves? How many Derek Matthews are still patrolling, their complaints uninvestigated, their patterns ignored? How many departments prioritize aggressive enforcement over constitutional policing? How many communities accept driving while black as just the way things are? Because if we don't address the culture that created Matthews, the supervision that enabled him, the systems that protected him until he embarrassed the wrong person, then we're just waiting for the next Matthews, the next Thompson, the next viral video. Comment if you believe this should be law. Automatic federal investigation and potential decertification for any officer with 5 or more sustained racial profiling complaints. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. Because we're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the detectives, the doctors, the regular people who deserve to exist in public spaces without being criminalized. What's your biggest takeaway from this story? Drop it in the comments below. This isn't just about one officer, one detective, one department. It's about all of us, and the world we're willing to accept. See you in the next one.